Oh, okay, so you just show up anywhere uninvited? Wait, is it December already? I mean, I assume we would skip November given the incident. Some of you are relatively new. You've become fans over the last year or so, and that's nothing to be ashamed of, because I did too. Admittedly, I wasn't really watching this guy's videos in the early 20s. I had my own ship to run. That is a metaphor. It wasn't a literal ship yet. And luckily, and because it's my job now, I guess, all of these old videos of questionable quality have been archived here. Like, for example, you know we did a video about Dr. Seuss movies? Scary Godmother 1, that one's going in the fire. Even these older videos held together by a talentless hack who doesn't understand pacing or editing or audio equipment, I will concede, have their entertainment value. And although I've been kept on the sidelines for so long, I am a fan of the holidays. Back at headquarters, we used to gather around and I would watch my favorite holiday special, 100 Questions for the Santa Claus movies. Why did we ever get rid of the couch? I felt it was always much more convenient. I'm getting too into continuity too early into this video. I get it. Like that one video from 2020. When I mention it, like these other videos, a link that you can click is going to appear on screen and you're going to feel the need to click it. But this is not reverse psychology. Do not click it. This video was made in 2020 by a 19-year-old who does not know what he is doing. It does not hold up. Plus, you don't even need to watch it, as I will give you a quick refresher on the franchise. The year is 1994. Scott Calvin, played by one Tim Allen, is being gang stalked by elves that blend in with children, all while he's being the most divorced dad ever. One of the most divorced dads ever. He gets to watch his very good kid Charlie on Christmas Eve. No clue how he swing that. Where he takes him to Denny's. Ew, yuck, we fucking hate Denny's. Then he kills Santa Claus by knocking him off the roof, not with a gun. He instinctively puts on Santa's coat because why not? Get your fingerprints all over the evidence, who cares? He doesn't really believe it's Santa, but he flies around the world delivering presents anyway. And a radiator turns into a fireplace. They make a big deal about this. Mind-boggling effects. They fly to the North Pole where they meet the mastermind behind this cult. Part of the setup, Bernard. And Scott Calvin is creepy towards a kid. Scott slowly turns into Santa Claus over time as the parasite worms its way into his brain, where Scott basically doesn't exist anymore. Forced transformation. My least favorite trope. This first movie, outside of the Santa Claus of it all, doesn't really have a plot, per se. After several montages, Santa kidnaps Charlie with the elf militia, and then gets entrapped by the police. He escapes by killing a ton of cops, I think, and Christmas is saved. He truly was the Santa Claus. 8 years later, in 2002, Charlie is a naughty boy, due to the crushing pressure of not being able to tell people his dad's job. He has a sister now, birthed by Scott's ex-wife and Jerry from Rick and Morty. I will defend this man and his sweaters with my life. Anyway, she calls Scott Uncle Scott for some reason. You're not even related to this guy a little bit. According to this smaller Poindexter elf we've never seen before, Santa has to get married in like a day or else no Santa forever and always. But don't worry, we can make a perfect plastic clone of you to be Santa while you're away. Also for if you don't make it back and become Tim Allen again, sorry. But while Scott Calvin slowly takes autonomy back from Kris Kringle and blows it over and over with perfect wife material, Toy Santa becomes a Nazi obsessed with the irrelevant procedure of naughty and nice, defining every child as naughty, and plans to deliver coal to every house this year with his army of toy soldiers. Santa falls in love with Charlie's principal, who hates Christmas, which has got to be really hard on Charlie, who's already getting lost in the shuffle and having a hard time. They get married Vegas style, and they have an endgame fight with evil Santa. Scott kills him to death, and Christmas goes on as planned. 4 years later, in 2006, our previously introduced holiday characters that I deemed the last Guardians, good joke, have a new guy named Jack Frost, not the one you think are picturing, who has apparently been there the whole time. Through some snow globe shenanigans, Scott gives his niece, who isn't related to him at all, special powers somehow. Each of these snow globes holds the timeline that were split after each mere mortal killed Santa to become the creature. Put a pin in that for later. Jack Frost uses the Scott Calvin snow globe to go back in time and steal the Santa garb to become the new flesh puppet. Due to contractual obligations and likely the marketing, Scott becomes normal Tim Allen again and has to fight Jack Frost at the now commercialized North Pole after a musical number that I actually really like. They go back to the main timeline where Not Niece uses her powers to turn turn Jack Frost into a white guy. Christmas is saved, the Clauses have a kid, and Charlie gets lost in the shuffle again. At least he's not like Bernard, who has gone missing under mysterious circumstances. And all of this was reviewed and portrayed as a therapy session and also a Christmas carol, I think, as the kid in gray lie in his bed talking to figures that may or may not be there. There's a skeleton, a charmed Resident Evil 2 cartridge, camera guy whose name I can't remember, glasses, voice of reason, witch. How come I never see any of these guys anymore? Anyway, and it all ends with this kid all alone as he speaks to the very machine I put him inside. Actually, wait, can we skip this part? Can we take this off the screen, please? I don't want to think about this anymore. I'm not supposed to know about it. Okay, we done? We all caught up? I'm sorry, this is embarrassing. I have to ask. You would tell me if you were the camera guy from before, trapped inside this camera and thus giving you control over spatial anomalies, right? And now I'm the one going crazy. So, why am I talking about this now? That was 2020, and this is current year. I'm asking the same damn question. What more could possibly be said about the Santa Claus universe? Apparently, I'm not the only one asking that question. It seems that millennial nostalgia is Disney's streaming service bread and butter. You guys like Wizards of Waverly Place? You guys like the Proud Family? You like Rebels on Disney XD? Don't you want to see Ezra and Sabine and the other guy and Chopper on the big screen? I mean, I'd much rather see a movie, but okay. By the way, I have always wanted to talk about Wizards in depth, as I do a lot of other shows, because that show impacted me a lot as a kid, like probably more so than Babysitter and H2O. But I have a personal rule that I will not talk about any childhood show if there is a nostalgia rewatch podcast. I am very glad I threw away my Ned's Declassified script when I did. Oh shit, is that Ronald Reagan from hit film Ronald Reagan? Bedtime for Bonzo?
Bedtime for Bonzo!
I truly believe that the Disney Corporation has the power to manufacture nostalgia for their franchises. Let me ask you, did you see the Santa Claus in theaters, or did you see it rerun on the Disney Channel, or ABC Family, or Freeform? Can't wait to watch Hocus Pocus 2. Man, I just really want to go to Walgreens for some reason. I can't quite put my finger on it, but I really want to go to Walgreens. At least it's better than Denny's. Fuck Denny's. I would say it would only be a matter of time before the Santa Claus series got Disney Plus. But then I would also say, no it isn't. Did this show need to exist? Well, evidently not, or evidently so, depending on how much you view this amount of episodes as a triumph, as it only has 2 seasons, each with 6 episodes. And these are not the regular Disney Plus shows, whether it be Marvel or Star Wars, where they're 40-minute plus for no reason, and really do not fill that runtime. These are like 30, which is arguably way worse. You see, Disney does this funny little thing now where they get movie scripts that are made to become movies that would work really well as movies, and they would become movies, and you would go see the movies, and then they think, what if this was a TV show? What if we added a full hour of Obi-Wan fucking around with Kumail Nanjiani for no reason? I like Kumail, I don't care. What if every single one of our Marvel shows had a famous 2-episode dip that all of our fans are aware of? Why do any of this at all? I strongly believe, maybe I'm pretentious, that if you are not HBO and not making prestige television, you should not be pulling out 40-minute episodes, you freak. Did anyone even watch this show? I'm certain some of you are learning of its existence for the first time in this video. Well, here we are. After all these years gathered around the fire, holding our candy canes and sipping on hot cocoa, the only difference is I have to talk about hours of Tim Allen again. Does the show bring up new and interesting questions? Does it warrant its own existence? Does this show even need to exist? I can answer one of those questions, probably the last one. No. I still can't believe this got 2 seasons. Episode 1 opens a lot like the original movie, which is going to be the main source of inspiration for this show. With a new curmudgeon, a new Scrooge, who mirrors Scott Calvin when we find him in his distance from Christmas. He hears a click, click, click up on the rooftop and automatically assumes it's Borderlands-esque marauders. That's the actual word he uses, marauders. And then activates his purge house to get around any ill doings. 16 years have passed in real time, which if we're following the pattern of the movies means 16 years have passed in canon. Probably, and somehow the CG reindeer look even worse. I don't know how Disney shows keep pulling this off, but it looked more convincing in 2006. I guess all their CG budget went into making Harrison Ford look as red as possible. That's how you know he's really mad. When I said that this show takes inspiration from the first film, I meant it, as the Elf Militia now has a military control room for drone striking the naughty children, which seems to be most of them. The good list has gotten smaller, but Santa and his new sidekick of indeterminate age is determined to get to the bottom of this. So he swings by his favorite kid's house. Kind of strange to have a favorite kid, only to find out she does not recognize him, which surprises him for some reason.
I understand adults lose their belief in magic. It just grows out of them. But how do you not remember me?
Okay, well, don't do that move, man. You have been doing this for 23 years, 23 Christmases, and you forgot that adults don't believe in Santa? That's the plot of the first movie. And since we're focusing on the first movie, gotta do the classic radiator bit. Can't forget about the radiator that turned into a fireplace. Hey, why not go through the front door, you psycho? Evidently, he has to use the door, as Santa is having a little trouble getting it up the chimney. And by it, I mean him. And by it, let's just say, oh, don't worry, it happens to plenty of men at this age. So is her radiator just permanently a chimney now? We don't ever see him change it back. This has got to be breaking zoning laws. 16 years is a long time, as the Christmas baby from the escape clause is now, and let me do some math here, 16? Not only is he a gamer, but also a brother, as it seems the Santa Clauses, had another kid.
But is that real?
Define real, which gets Scott Calvin's list of neglected children up to 3. You only work 1 day a year. Santa has fallen. Billions must cry. While Santa is out crashing, I guess, neglecting his children, they're growing up stunted and alone and maladjusted by being homeschooled by their Christian conservative family. A famously good combination. I hate to ruin your escapism, because a lot of you come to these videos to forget about the world, because I am not a part of your world. But I only learned about this after looking at the dates on the tapes. I didn't actually know this, that the first Santa Claus video that we made in December 2020 was actually uploaded 12 days before Joe Biden was inaugurated as the new president of the United States, and the other guy threw a tantrum. And now it seems I don't really get a lot of news from the outside world anymore. I'm just assuming, because nothing ever changes. I'm sorry you have to hear this from me, but if you already didn't notice about these movies, the Santa Clause is a very conservative series. Santa didn't get shot down by the US military, he was pulling a fast one.
Good one, big man. I wasn't nervous at all.
I love that they have to specifically portray that the elves love working and hate vacations as to circumvent the indentured servitude allegations. And then he even accuses them of lying.
Well, you can't believe everything you hear, can you?
Oh, I'm sorry, Santa. Are you saying that the elves were lying?
Elves don't lie. What do you take us for, gnomes?
In an act that will shake this conservative household to its core, the Mrs. Claus begins showing signs of autonomy. She even suggests that Scott retire as Santa, which is not how this works. He needs to die in action, which raises even more questions from her as she asks him, after 20 years by the way, if he knows whether or not the last guy even had a wife. You know, the last Santa. The guy's got shot, and like any good husband, he's incredibly paranoid about the prospect of his wife having ideas. I never thought I need to bust out the montage counter for this series, but here we are. A lot could change in 4 years, or nothing could change at all. Speaking of...
And how's the Christmas spirit?
Fine, except saying Merry Christmas to all has suddenly become problematic.
Oh, brother.
Naughty.
Sorry, Santa, but that's classic ADHD.
You're killing me here, Edie.
And actually, sir, we're not supposed to say naughty anymore. It's the misunderstood list, and they also get gifts.
God, did Tim Allen write this? Oh, actually, you know what?
And everybody with their head meds.
My favorite and least favorite Tim all in the same video. It's okay, Tim Robinson, you'll get your time soon. And wait a minute, the naughty and nice list is decided by Elf and Santa Council? I thought he had no control over this. That's why he was shocked when Charlie was on the list. That's the plot of the second, but did you watch the second movie? I don't blame you for forgetting about Charlie. Scott did too. I was wondering why this dynamic seems so derivative, but I just assumed it was aping the original movie's flow. But it wasn't until the man's daughter started campaigning to free reindeer in captivity and his son was acting weird that I realized this is American Dad. Conservative father with a nostalgia for the past and an important job has a hot wife who questions his authority over his loser son and activist daughter. Also, alien thing, I think? I actually have no clue what this thing is supposed to be. Merry Krampus. All right, now they're using portals to travel. This show truly has no respect for the extended Santa Claus canon. It's revealed here that the Scrooge we saw earlier is actually a greedy tech CEO who sets his sights on the Santa Claus after he seems to be the only one who catches him traveling through dimensions, I guess. It's a very open sky. This is shot exactly like one of those creatures caught on camera videos. Number 15. Santa caught on tape. I may be putting words in the mouth of Scott Calvin, but consider, he is dead. The episode does in fact end with Scott Calvin falling off the roof a la the first Santa Claus movie. Oh, don't you just miss the 90s? Kids have ADHD and autism now. They never used to have that. It's unfortunate that this season came out in 2022, and I'm only talking about it now because in this episode, Scott refers to naughty kids derogatorily as brats. And I just know if they waited a couple of years. The fail son has a premonition that something bad has happened to their father. And while that is true, he isn't quite dead yet, as Scott's sidekick uses his sound powers to wake him up. How long until they forget he can do that? While writing this, I forgot he could do that. You're lucky to have a fail son in Elves that cares this deeply about you, because if this happened 2 years in a row, fuck you, Toy Who Cried Wolf, I'm going to bed. Did he even finish the night, or did he come straight here? Because of his inability to compete properly, Santa has to be introduced to a new clause. I mean, the show is called The Santa Clauses. Hey, look, it's the other two clauses they forgot about. I do really like this bit of every time they make a new one of these, there's just smaller fine print they didn't read last time. As it turns out, Santa doesn't need to kill himself if he really doesn't want to. Santa Claus is allowed to retire and decide his replacement. I gotta ask, how often has this happened though? Because Santa is like immortal and he's only been at this for 23 years, which in the grand scheme of eternity is not a long time. Was the last guy slated to retire, but then he took one last voyage and got shot down? I like to believe there was one elf smoking a really tiny cigarette saying,
Damn. 1 week to retirement.
I'm getting too old for this shit. Retirement is fantastic news for the missus who wants freedom and autonomy, which spells disaster for this guy. If you thought me comparing the show to American Dad was annoying and a stretch, well, now Santa has decided to pick a succession. Why pick a replacement he doesn't know and has to train when he could keep it in the family?
I think I could save us both all that time.
Oh, here it comes. He's gonna pick the son who had a premonition earlier and saved his life.
Charlie.
Oh. Wow, this really is Succession. So Pimp Santa goes to the most magical place on Earth. Florida. The Bezos bread man comes up with a revolutionary new concept. Drones! Sure. Why not? Scott Calvin visits his eldest son, who he forgot existed until about 5 minutes ago. He has grandkids? Do we know their names? Does he know their names? All-American male Scott Calvin asks his patriot son to throw away his life and come work at the North Pole. But Charlie's evil and controlling wife convinces him not to. You're trying to keep me from seeing my son. You're just like that judge. This is not the life he wants, especially not for his children, as he lightly calls out his father on his choice to raise his children at the North Pole. Santa brings us to the current head elf, but not before the man's wife can offer the job to her. But apparently elves aren't allowed to be Santa. I guess this does not apply to ice creatures. Plus, she's a girl. A woman can't deliver presents. The people will never vote for that. What if she goes to fly around on Christmas and she bleeds all over the... I'm not doing this bit anymore. They learned that their kids are the only kids to ever be raised at the North Pole. And they turned out... Santa Scott takes his least favorite son on a ride in the sleigh because he always be on that damn phone. But the phone is a meta quest, on sale now.
Hey, speaking of killing, you ever think about if some psycho learns about the Santa Claus and sets a trap out for your coat?
All the time.
I'm glad that they took 16 years of feedback on this series and are finally addressing it. And I wasn't the only one saying that, all right? I'm certain that nobody working on this show watched our video. I'm like 90% sure. Speaking of continuity.
He wants a replacement, but he also wants to stick around after.
Maybe we can make a duplicate him.
Yeah, because that worked out so well last time.
Whatever happened to that guy? Okay, so I'm gonna need you to pay attention here. Apparently this orb, not a snow globe, they call it an orb, shout out Kids' Choice Awards. The orb is normally glowing and cheery, but now it's forming a sort of black hole in the middle that spells bad news for Santa. The current head elf says that the last time this happened was 100 years ago and caused pestilence and sickness, sort of implying that the last Santa who went crazy, Mad Santa, caused the Spanish flu, which is already strange enough, but now it's black again, and they haven't given us a precise year yet. I just assumed this was set in 2022 since all the previous movies were set in their release year, but a year has already passed in canon. Like, we've seen 2 Christmases, so maybe we'll get another time skip. Maybe we're earlier than we thought. All of that to say, are they implying that Santa Claus is gonna cause the coronavirus? What a political show. Scott walks in on his only children who matter, dreaming of the outside world. It's here we get the reveal that every time the Failson has been escaping into VR, he's actually been pretending to be in Kansas. The real magic is family. We always have each other. They're putting fluoride in the water, so on and so forth. It's set in stone. Santa Scott prepares to announce his retirement, but then it dawns on him that when he showed up here for the first time, all the elves were so cheery and welcoming. What if they celebrate his absence? And then he makes the announcement, and absolute panic washes over the crowd. Okay, so what the fuck was going on with the last Santa then? We already questioned whether or not he had a wife. We assumed she was let go after he died, but maybe he got to her first. The elves were so excited when he died, and then earlier in the episode, his fail son plants the seed in our head that someone could have planted a trap for Santa to get rid of him. And we know in the opening of the Santa Claus 1, the elves have been watching over Scott, grooming their new leader. And then you may be thinking, oh, but Andrew, the elves can never do that. They can never set Santa up. But the episode ends with the elf militia kidnapping the humbug tech guy as he is summoned to the North Pole. This show raises a lot of interesting questions, 100 questions, some might say, but I don't think it's going to compound on a single one of them. Show has 2 seasons. I hate the way this freak rubs his belly. Today is the day that Santa Claus needs to pick the succession, and we have 2 applicants. That seems like not enough. At that point, you just brought in adult baby Gronk to make the other guy look better.
We're seriously considered.
Bullshit.
You were,
All right,
yes?
you dragged my ass in there as a dog and pony show, all right? You had Nort in mind from day 1, and you put me in there to light a fire under Nort's agent's ass.
Hey, wait a minute.
I remember the marketing really hyping this cameo up. The Gronk is at the North Pole for like 5 minutes. Was the Gronk there? It's clear that they want this tech CEO to be the next Santa, so they show him around the North Pole. At the same time, Scott's 2 kids, his only 2 kids, are going through a lot of emotions. The eldest, whose name we learn is Buddy Calvin Jr., which is why they call him Cal. Also, with a name like Buddy and a sitcom premise like fish out of water that's only ever lived in the North Pole goes to the real world, where was I going with this? The son, Cal, is very excited about leaving, where the daughter is not, which does not track with the only 2 episodes we saw them in prior, but oh well. Speaking of not tracking with their previously established characters, this tech CEO seems like a really nice guy with no ulterior motives. I guess I was wrong. He's got a dead wife backstory and everything. So did the Kingpin. That's all I'm gonna say. While the tech whiz stumbles around off screen and Cal asks 100 questions for his daughter, Scott Santa briefs the Grink about his potential hurdles he may have to overcome, like Santa traps that are apparently a common occurrence. That's what I thought the CEO was gonna do. If you're gonna rip off Elf, you might as well shoot for Home Alone as well. Wait a minute. Both of those pictures are set around the same time, and they're both set in New York. Could that mean... What does that mean for this guy?
I wish I brought him something. What do you give Santa? He's into NFTs.
Oh, fucking... Shut up. That's what I get for referencing current events. The girl daughter takes the newest outside kid to see the reindeer, where she learns that she can communicate with them. All she needs now is ice powers. Must be the full moon.
Why does the North Pole need a jail?
High crimes and mistletoe meaners.
Did I write this episode? What is this? If we're gonna keep showing clips, can we at least use them for exposition?
When Grace's mom passed, I stopped believing in everything.
I prayed to Santa Claus to save my wife's life, but he let her rot. You let my wife perish because you were too busy building toys on your decaying empire. And then the 2 dads run into the forest and encounter a Christmas witch. We predicted this in our video. Okay, now they definitely watched it. I'm like 10% sure. She only exists so that the daughter can have a mentor help her master her new influence over powerful animals, to do her will. Also to have her patriarch rescue her from the bad influence, or whatever. Surely there's a reason we haven't seen the Christmas Witch in 3 movies, no? Daughter makes a note to point out Santa's very short list of things he wants to do when they leave as the reason not to go. But the kids have been here their whole lives. He hasn't. What do you mean he's struggling with the concept of the outside world? He was Tim Allen long before he was the Santa Claus. He was a human person for at least 30 years and Santa for like 20. It's very funny that one of the major reasons Scott decided to retire is so that his children can live normal lives outside the North Pole and then give the job to a single parent with a daughter he now has to raise here. Wait a minute, does the Grink have any kids? They also elect to not tell the new guy about the other clauses because I guess they need to make another season of the show somehow. Making a recent divorcee have to go and find a wife to save Christmas is motivation. Making a recent widow do it is cruel. I've been holding off on mentioning the several musical numbers as most of them finish before they start, and they've all been like Kids Bop covers of Christmas songs. And girls just want to have fun. This breakdancing is just abysmal. Terrible job, everyone.
Christmas.
Okay, admittedly, I do like that bit. They should make a movie about that. There's actually been a lot of bits I liked in this episode, like the creepy shirt Santa owns but never wears. I guess I have to stop calling him Santa now, considering he's just Tim Allen, or Scott Calvin. I went into this expecting Elf and I got Christmas with the Cranks. This is even harder on the kids. They have never seen their dad with Tim Allen face before. We all get it from time to time. Listen, if this were accurate to 2022, there would be no snow on the ground in December, which leads me to believe that this does take place before the 20s. And so the episode ending with the ominous black hole taking over the orb means we're in for a pandemic. Let's go! It is simultaneously really nostalgic and strange that I'm talking about a property we first covered in 2020, and now I'm talking about that era in the past tense. Maybe I should retire. We're nearly finished with the season, and only now is the crux of the show began, which is a flawed concept anyway. He's acting like he's never been to Earth before. 1, Santa should know all about human culture if he watches over all of them. 2, and this is the big one, he lived most of his life as a guy. Like, I get it, he's been Santa for 23 years. 22? 24? 20? I don't know. This episode takes place over another full calendar year. It's Christmas again. It's the 3rd Christmas portrayed in this show. I have no clue what year it is. Anyway, Scott is having trouble adapting.
He's got those PJs with the Buzz Lightyear on them that I thought was so... They're cute.
All right, I get it. You guys see that the plot of the next Toy Story film is gonna be the plot of the second Santa Claus film? Do you think he held a vendetta after they recast him for that Starman movie? I call it Starman because the only thing I remember about that movie is that they used Starman for the trailer. You want to know what I call Quantumania? The rest of the family is very excited to be in Chicago. An American high school. The safest place for my children. While Scott is struggling, Carol, that's his wife's name if you forgot, I also forgot. She gets a job here as this is apparently the school she worked at before throwing her life away. I somehow did remember she was a principal, but not her name. It's because of the whole war on Christmas angle in the second movie. This literally is a war on Christmas. While Cal, the son, if you remember, immediately clicks with a girl who has colored hair and just got rejected from the softball team she so badly wanted to be a part of. I don't think you have a shot here, man. I don't think she swings that way. Now that was a softball joke. High school. We've all fallen madly in love with a lesbian before. Oh, what, this isn't a safe space all of a sudden? Doesn't that mean Charlie used to go to this school? Did he get expelled? He did vandalize property. So yeah, 6 minutes into this episode, another 80 days pass, and now it's Memorial Day.
Barbecues? Games and fun? What are we memorialing?
Fallen soldiers.
What?
I wonder if they gave Tim free rein on the show to apologize for Starman. After learning about the concept of war for the first time, he hunts down the one girl he knows who is not his sister, Riley, who is transferred to a different school to, quote, play softball. This raises an important point, actually. I know that they need to blend in as realistically as possible, but they're just jumping into high school classes. Cal just learned that soldiers can die, and he's expected to read and understand Animal Farm. By the way, if I was Riley, I would be suspicious, but Santa Claus would not be my first guess. I would assume these guys are aliens. Cal and Carol are doing well, but the girl daughter, I can't remember every name. It's either know her name or forget about Charlie. Or the other girl, his niece that isn't actually related to Scott, who does not appear in this show at all. She boards a wild horse like Breath of the Wild and can communicate with it after. So does she talk to every animal or just equines? In the span of only 3 months, your kids have become a horse girl and a beard. Congrats, Dad. And now it's Christmas, actually. It's been almost a full year again. But this is interrupted as the elf sidekick flees to Scott Calvin to warn him about the new Santa replacement. Oh, wait, I need to explain how we got here. Okay, so the tech CEO wakes up looking like a guy because the magic coat he's supposed to put on has gone missing. Certainly saves on makeup. He uses his corporate speak to the elves, and because of which never ends up saying anything really of note. He does reject the boundary crossing request for hugs and tuck-ins at night. I could feel the atmosphere changing for the better. Does the North Pole have an HR? But this new Santa sees a business opportunity on the table. If the North Pole already knows what everyone in the world wants, not just kids, then they can technically express deliver any day of the year. Christmas can be every day. Just to say, this is hyped up as a terrible thing, all the while we keep cutting back to the Calvins in the real world over an entire year, and nothing changes. Everything is the same. I'm not saying giving everyone everything they could ever want every day would not ruin Christmas. I'm saying it isn't conveyed at all beyond rumblings at the North Pole. And there are rumblings. The elf pushes back on this decree and says a man from the North Pole giving everyone everything they want will ruin the spirit of giving on the holiday, which... So what are you doing then? Like in the real world, where Santa isn't real, sorry, adult man babies that watch my video and poop their diapers, gross. The spirit of giving is people gifting and receiving gifts from their loved ones to their loved ones. In a universe where Santa already does all of that, there is no spirit of giving. And again, I know it's been done to death. I know everyone says this about every Christmas movie ever, but where do the adults think the presents are coming from every year if they don't believe in Santa?
Oh, please, you two haven't even kissed yet.
All these months, you haven't kissed her, huh?
Well, not everyone dates for 6 minutes and then, you know, gets married like us.
And now they're becoming self-aware of how weird everything in this universe is. By the way, he introduces this with no profit incentive. He's just trying to make gift giving more efficient. You aren't fighting him on grounds of monopolizing Christmas. You're fighting him on grounds of communism. Oh, maybe they did let Tim write this show.
My beautiful, forever young elves. Who wants to give me some of your blood? I'm just kidding, come on, I'm kidding.
Oh, most definitely. You don't just put that in there on accident. Did Alex Jones write this episode? I don't normally name names, so I won't, but just know that the only writers' names with additional Wikipedia articles attached to them for this show are the people involved with Last Man Standing and The Man Show. So, okay, but admittedly, he does add a payment system later in the year. It's been a year? Not to go to bat for the CEO, but he only does this after elves go missing and reindeers don't want to fly. And then Santa's sidekick challenges him to a duel. The loser must leave the North Pole in shame, which is a rule they have in their constitution, I guess. It seems like the most efficient way to get a new Santa is to always just kill the old one. No other way. The head elf shuts this down, which technically means the elf conceded from the duel, and then she's shocked when he goes AWOL. Like, did you not read the rule? He's excommunicated, which is how he ends up in Chicago with Scott Calvin surprisingly accepting the change until they get beat by children in a snow fight. He was just really mad and paranoid that somebody killed his snowman.
Someone bit his nose off like a little snot. What kind of monster eats a carrot?
Hippies and vegans. Hippie vegan.
Tim Allen's worst nightmare. The tech CEO goes full evil mask off when the head elf brings up the orb being taken over by that icky paint-like goop. Honestly, if he's gonna be bad Santa, just challenge him to a duel. I'm sure you could take him. Do you think the elves get to raise his kid and keep it if he gets excommunicated? Like, he's the only one that's allowed to leave. Then the elves, burst into a pile of glitter. I hate to say it, but again, I don't think this is his fault, because after the head elf is fired, she goes to the house of the Christmas witch, who we only just met, and Santa's coat is in her house. She says, I don't know how it got here, and the head elf responds, oh, well, it's probably safer here. Dude, reindeer are AWOL, elves are exploding, and the orb is being overtaken by black magic. She has the coat. You don't think she has anything to do with this? You don't know her. For all you know, the sidekick elf that you are seeing on the side is dead, and it's likely her fault. And then the episode ends with this sweet Calvin family moment of bonding, ruined as the family is frozen and an ominous hand is put on Scott Calvin's shoulder. Cut to black. And I know I said it last time, but after all that setup, now we have a show. In episode 5 of 6, now the premise is happening. Oh. This entire episode is exposition, and the things they expose are insane. Now I remember why I want to talk about this franchise. The lore implications beg so many questions. I take back what I said, or what anyone has said about this show existing. It warrants its existence. This universe is absurd. Big reveal, the first of many. It turns out the ominous hand on Scott Calvin's shoulder actually belongs to Bernard, which tracks since the show is mainly focused on nostalgia for the first film. They finally address why he was missing in the third movie and nobody brought it up. Also why he looks like this now. Off-screen, Bernard fell in love with a human woman and gave up his eternal youth to be with her. Okay, so you do have to explain why he's visibly aged, but I have some questions. Where did he meet this human woman? He never ventured to the human world in the 2 movies he was in, and the only people that were allowed, the only humans that were allowed to go back and forth were the Clause family. Does this mean he married her? Does magic have strict rules on monogamy? Or did he choose to give up his youthful teen body so that his wife wouldn't be weirded out? Follow-up question, they had to have fallen in love before he gave up his youth, right? So that means that this woman fell in love with a person who, as far as she knew, was the body of a teenager, and you just let him go with her? Can anyone overturn the magical youth powers, or does it have to be a priest when you get married? Because Scott, as Santa, was not aware this happened, and he was Santa at the time. Who's his superior? Did the Christmas witch do this? What do you mean? Bernard was the one who froze Scott's family, using this clicker. Like for dogs. I still have several questions, but I don't think I should ask. Bernard takes Scott Calvin through the Ghost of Christmas Past, or whatever, where we see the 17th installment of Santa Claus during the Great Depression. Maybe it's just because I know this actor, or maybe it's the black and white, but I could not stop thinking about Cinnabon here for some reason. I wanted to fact check this joke and make sure it was the same actor, and it is, but in doing so I learned that he's played Santa Claus in 3 different projects in the span of less than a year. Where's this guy been? They put that costume on him in one Parks and Rec episode, and he has had job security ever since. Anyway, another big reveal. This 17th incarnation is the one that Scott killed. But that's after we see the church figures. And Krampus? Does Scott know him? Like, I know he knows of him, but does he know him personally? Also, does this imply that Krampus was one of the previous incarnations? Was he number 16? He just went on a Krampus adventure in the near 20 years we didn't see him? This really is American Dad. There have been like 15 Christmases in between the third movie and this season that we missed, and they must have all been eventful because it is revealed over several scenes. One where St. Nicholas himself shows up. Fuck it, bring Jesus out next.
Did somebody say?
It is revealed that the 17th Better Call Saul Santa actually killed himself in front of Scott on purpose to change the trajectory of his life. The clauses were put in place to direct the new human Santa that was all set up by him. Scott Calvin was the first human-born Santa Claus. They kind of dance around it like, oh, I gifted the title to you. But he did die. He's dead. He killed himself in front of Scott and his kid. Apparently, Bernard knew about this project as head elf for millennia. He protested at first. But this was all a plan to turn the title into a monarchy and create a Santa bloodline, and they could only do that by entrapping a human and making sure children were conceived at the North Pole. Confirming that the elves spying on him in the first movie were not a coincidence. I was right. This was all set up by a cult. Did they seriously watch that video? It has like 10K views max. So multiple incarnations speaking to each other, a half-human hybrid, children gaining special Christmas powers after being conceived in a magical place. Did Stephen Moffat write this? No. There's not enough internet history jokes. I have to ask, Why this guy? They decided to pick Scott Calvin because he was pure of heart as a kid, I guess, but we know he grew up to be a sad divorcee with a complex. Also, what if the timeline where he became Jack Frost? You don't want to get up and stop him, Santa? The Santa royal bloodline is strange, right?
I deliver gifts during drought, colonization.
Try the Dark Ages.
Big deal. I had the Great Depression, World War II, Vietnam, and the Star Wars Holiday Special. Come on.
As Scott leaves with his new blown mind, the camera zooms out to reveal a bunch of other Santas who were standing right off screen. So wait, did it go from Saint Nick to Krampus to Cinnabon, or were these guys in there too? Forget Doctor Who, this is the Avatar state. Scott returns home to his now unfrozen family with great news! They have to uproot their lives and go back to the North Pole. Again, he tells them that the clauses were actually made exclusively for humans and that none of the other Santas even had a Mrs. Claus, which rightfully terrified and angers the wife. So they made up the Mrs. Claus. They made this guy who they handpicked to be Santa. They wanted him to be Santa. They forced him back into Scott Calvin unless he gets married against his will and no more Christmas forever. Bernard did this? Is this how new clauses keep magically appearing? Yeah, I'd be pissed too. Your whole marriage is built off a lie made by gods to toy with mortals, and you finally have a real life again, and he wants to go back? Evidently, he does go back with his sidekick, who is still in Chicago, I guess. Scott Calvin has abandoned his family once more. And now that he's gone, we actually see the adverse effects that Tech Santa has had on the human world through Softball Sally Riley, who, by the way, attempts to drag the truth out of Cal, even though at this point she assumes it's some kind of witness protection thing. Like, you know this is serious. Why are you doing this? Why are you being dangerous for no reason?
I don't believe in Santa. So why would he come down my chimney?
To give your little brother the look he Funko Pop he wants?
Fuck off. The family is able to go after the sidekick and Scott using their newfound God-given Christmas powers. Horse Girl through her innate ability to speak to horses and make them fly, and Cal with his ability to see vortexes that no other humans can see. Gotta say, they do not seem evenly matched. I guess that explains why humans can't see Santa flying through the sky, except for the fact that Tech Santa could. Like, that is his call to action for this story. Are they all related? Is that why they picked him? Evidently not, as Santa is caught in a Santa trap and then placed in a Santa jail as his Santa orb is Santa stolen. But do not worry, as his sidekick is still loose in the building as he tries to explain his absence to his partner in the head elf, but she disappears right before he can get to her. That's what you get for hanging around witches. I don't know why I didn't expect this. Almost every Disney Plus original has the same formula. Okay to decent to sometimes good, drops in quality in the middle 2 episodes, and then has a big reveal in the penultimate episode right before the finale. I just didn't expect the Santa Clauses to do that. Maybe I really am not cut out for this job. The other guy saw much more potential in this series. I look awful. I mean, if you think about it, I'm his Scott Calvin. He died in front of me and trapped me in this annoying job. This episode sucks. Like, as a finale, it doesn't resolve or say anything. We know that the coat went missing at the beginning of the new Santa regime and that it's in the possession of the Christmas witch, but not anymore. Now someone stole it from her when she was plotting her evil plot. Why do you allow her to live here? Like, I know she's on the outskirts, but still. While the family sneaks around to find Scott, Tech Bro learns that whoever controls the Santa coat controls the North Pole. Which, yeah. He should know how it works. They told him this episodes ago. That's why he freaked out when he lost it. So this episode fringes on all parties trying to get the coat first, as Scott needs to get freed.
We'll use your powers. Can you get us out of here?
No, but Sandra can speak to animals, and I can see holes in the sky.
Fun, interesting, anticlimactic, because we're still stuck in here.
At least he's supportive. As soon as they choose the family business and not Earth. No son of mine is gonna be a figure skater. Evidently, the bars are made out of licorice, so they have to eat their way out. But not before Sidekick can kill Eye Patch in cold blood. A character I didn't even bring up once, and now we'll never have to bring up again, I hope. I know I was the one comparing the evil Santa last time to a Nazi, and I don't want to be on the side of genocide, but they just keep giant toy soldiers around from the second movie. I would melt those fuckers in a furnace. Like, okay, if you don't want to do that because they're sentient, that's fine. but you're still okay with keeping them trapped in this room for eternity as prisoners of war? I know you can't let them loose in the human world, but then just give them the Christmas witch. You obviously don't care what she's up to.
Wanga, is that you?
Yes, it's really me, Louis.
You understand me?
I've always understood you. But yes, I can talk to animals now, which is both a dream and a nightmare because some of y'all talk a lot.
Okay, so actually, what the fuck is this thing? At least reindeers are real creatures. What am I looking at? Is this gonna be important? Will this be on the test? I can't wait for more horrifying monster in season 2. But we're not there yet. You're okay with keeping these soldiers trapped away forever, but Cal reasons with the drones? Now I know this is propaganda. Because Carol fucking kills these guys in her fight scene. First of all, are they even dead? Because they also fell apart in their fight scene in the second movie. Who put them back together? Secondly, it is 2022 when the show is coming out. Scooby-Doo, the live action, came out 20 years before, and the only way you can think to write a strong female character is to make her do karate. I know this keeps coming up in every single video I make, but everything really is Buffy's fault. I guess that was Chicago-style fighting. She punched deep into their dishes. The coat actually escaped on its own. It's sentient, except for when it isn't. So it chose to go to the witch? She had nothing to do with this. She appears as a smoke monster to get hit in the face with a drone, thus losing the coat to Tech Boss. They canceled the Acolyte for this, and the Santa Clauses could just do whatever they want and get a second season? Darth Teeth gotta show up in the third one. I'm just gonna lay out what transpires in this scene, because when you say it out loud, you realize how dumb it is. The Tech Boss holds a lighter up to the coat and monologues about how he's the good guy here, he's saving Christmas, and he is fully prepared to burn the coat to do so. But then the coat hits him, and still holding the lighter in his hand, he says, "Time to throw you into the fire." You are holding a lighter! You're gonna light it on fire with your tool seconds ago. What happened? Did the punch give you amnesia? But it's in his turning around to go walk all the way over to the fire where he sees his daughter, who is sad that he's evil and won't spend time with her anymore. She wants them to be evil together as a family. Tech Boss comes to his senses and gives the coat he did not burn back. And I know it's customary for this series, but there are several unanswered questions. Like, the first season has so many plots that just stampede over each other. The orb has turned black, which is completely unrelated to this new Santa. Like, you could blame him all you want, but it was turning black even before he showed up. This was going to happen with or without him. And Scott's lesson to learn is that he shouldn't have shoved responsibility off on someone else at the first sign of fire, but he didn't want to go. Everyone in charge begged him to retire. He couldn't fly and fell off the roof. Tech Boss didn't even see him yet. But all is well, I guess, as they all group hug and for some reason allow the Christmas witch in on this. What does she even do? I promise you I've watched these episodes multiple times, and I'm doing my best to explain what happens, but you can only do so many rewatches before you just throw in the towel and say, it's Hugs. I guess Hugs did it. Because just like the climax of the third movie, it's Hugs, I guess. The family hug frees all the elf spirits that were trapped inside the black orb. What? Is that what that was? We didn't see any elves getting sucked into the orb. We saw them burst into glitter. It stops being a black hole after this. They, accidentally or not, implied that the evil black fog were the souls of elves. Why are their souls so ominous? We really didn't suspect the witch of anything? Scott Calvin puts the Santa coat back on and gets a magical girl transformation instead of a slow, painful one that stretches his bones. I don't blame the new guy for not putting on the suit. Wait, where is that guy? Where does he fit into all this? After learning a lesson from his only daughter that the only thing she wants for Christmas is to spend time together, they send both of them back to the human world. So, did they keep their memories? Because if they did, then this is one of the few humans who knows factually of Santa's existence, but cannot tell anyone or prove it in any meaningful way. Kids always keep their memories, but adults lose the spirit once they get older. But this guy has already gotten older, so will his daughter forget the time they spent together when she grows up, leaving her believing that her father has lost his mind? Or, worst scenario, did they erase his memory like they do with every other adult? Because then, what was the point of any of that? He goes to the North North Pole and learns a lesson and then just forgets, leaving his daughter distraught? There is no outcome where this isn't horrific for both of them. Did this finale actually solve anything? I guess we're gonna pretend it did. Christmas is saved, the 4th Christmas of the season, if I'm counting correctly, and nothing was learned. Softball Riley now has proof of Santa. I guess she's just allowed to be crazy, but not the antagonist we just redeemed. The resolution of everyone forgetting the reason for the season is that Cal stole all the snow globes that spy on every family to the families so they can relive their favorite Christmas memories. You don't see any logistical problems with this? Oh, okay, I guess show over then. Well, despite everything I just said in a vitriolic manner, it was kind of nice to talk about the Santa Clause again. For the first time, for me. I have a love-hate relationship with the franchise, and by that I mean it's psychotic, but because I watched it when I was a kid, I'm stuck with it. And while that probably would have just been better as another movie, like most Disney Plus projects, I can stand here knowing that they made one solid season of Christmas schlocky dumb fuckery. The Santa Clauses was received surprisingly well, and by that I mean most people who saw it or knew of its existence thought it was just okay, and Disney expected it to suck and flop. Even if only a handful of households watched it, it was around the Christmas season, and competition in December 2022 for Disney. I don't know why I said the year like that. Sorry, that was uncouth. You have Giganosaurus, National Treasure, Willow. Okay, now I see why they greenlit a second season. The same month they dumped Owl House Season 3 on YouTube. Sure. I want to say also, because I did take a break in between writing and watching these seasons, I did go to the cinema to see hit blockbuster film Red 1. Since I am not joking, it was the only movie playing at the theater that week. They also handed me a physical ticket for the first time after going to that theater for 2 years. So the only physical ticket I have is for the movie Red 1. And I bring it up because that movie, the plot of that movie, is actually incredibly similar to the first season of the Santa Clauses. I had gone 22 years of never hearing anything about a Christmas witch, and then the only 2 Christmas specials I watched this year, not counting Cats 2019, if you count that. Season 2 takes off right on the heels of the first as everyone around the world gets their snow globe memories gifted to them. One of those human men is Gabriel Iglesias from the year 2012, but more on him later. Scott wants Cal to be his succession, and a lot like Succession, puts his far more qualified daughter on the work nobody wants to do. She's in charge of the animals. They seem to have found a middle ground. They still look like the old CG, but also get their creepy eyes back. Or Cal would have been the succession if he didn't use his birthday wish. I forgot that he was born right after Christmas. Take this from someone whose birthday is days after Christmas. People tend to forget. He uses his wish to teleport his lesbian girlfriend to the North Pole. This has to break some kind of code, or clause. Well, the new clause, which is too stupid to say, now affects the head elf, even though we just learned last season that the clauses were made for humans, this specific human family. But whatever, now she has to go away and Sidekick is put in charge. Nepotism at its finest. This is Succession. Cal wants to make some major changes and really wants to lose his position, I guess.
There's so much I can't wait to change around here.
They just updated the manual 200 years ago.
What? You know what I was thinking? What if instead of flying, Santa took a train?
Well,
That is so cool.
No.
Ah, my liberal son wants a transit system. What's next? Walkable cities? Scott does describe himself as geeked this episode. He's learning. Oh, we're doing another Kids Bop number? I guess they didn't get any complaints. Until now. Here's a complaint. This eye patch guy has been showing up a lot this episode. Should I start remembering him? I hardly ever do. Scott Calvin Santa uses this change in power to usurp his own position and place Cal Jr. in office. This worries the elves left in charge, as this is reminiscent of the torturous Santa from 716 years ago, Magnus Antis, or as his enemies call him, Mad Santa, who was taken down by some sort of Christmas magic user. I knew they kept her around for something. I'm sure that this lore dump is important to the universe at large and all, but this is the first time we've gotten an exact number of years, so we could probably figure out when we're set. The opening says it takes place in 1307 AD, which, I'm doing the math, was exactly 716 years ago. as I'm writing this, meaning that this season, season 2, actually takes place Christmas 2024, as I'm filming this and you're seeing this, and we saw 3 or 4 Christmases last season, meaning they definitely caused the pandemic. Talk about a viral infection. And the episode ends with Gabriel Iglesias resurrecting the Mad Santa. Sure, why not? That was the more of him I was referring to earlier. I think it's really interesting that the original movie didn't really have a major antagonist. The obstacle was the challenges of being Santa and the desire for his one kid to keep liking it. And then they made a Nazi Santa in the second movie and got a whole villain song in the third, and it's just been all downhill ever since then. Last season we had the evil tech CEO, and now we've landed on 14th Century Conqueror, and I couldn't be any more or less indifferent to excited. This episode is the first time I believe this project deserves to be a show. I think there's a possibility that the first season was a movie script that got turned into a show, thus is the life of a Disney Plus original. They're even doing the inverse now. But it's the first that pushes our many plots along, way too many for a feature film. But I mean, a bunch of the stuff from last season got dropped last minute, so who even knows? I'm writing these episode by episode. It follows 2 different training arcs. Santa Claus, Scott Calvin, pushes the elves further out so he can force his family into the Santa business. And by that, I just mean Cal, who's going through his training while Riley, his softball girlfriend, who lives here now, and the elves are upset by being pushed out like this, but 1, he has no reason to trust them. They're hiding the truth about Magnus for some reason. And 2, this is the whole reason a human was made Santa in the first place, to sire a magical heir. Pretty convenient that the head elf isn't around to explain this. I'm pretty sure that's the only reason she's gone, because they show her in several flashbacks this episode. It's not like they couldn't get the actress. While Cal is getting all the attention, Sandra, remember we learned her name when that fucking thing talked to her, has been experiencing episodes of magic that her parents can't possibly understand. So she goes to the only woman who, although she knows she can't trust, the only one that could understand her. The Christmas Witch. And it's here where she shows her powers that she learns, in fact, she is a witch. Okay, so there could be multiple, like the hag is not a Christmas witch, she is the Christmas witch, that is her title. Okay, but maybe Sandra isn't the Christmas witch, but just like a regular witch, even though she got her powers because Santa is her dad and she was born at the North Pole. If anyone has priority over the Christmas Witch title, it would be her. And the Christmas Witch agrees to train her, even though this really threatens her job security. Meanwhile, Cal's training is going way worse. He's running a Christmas simulation, and before they revealed this, I just believed another Christmas passed right before our eyes. There is a chance that this show extends into 2025, and honestly, I think that makes this the perfect time to talk about it. Also, it will definitely never get that 3rd season.
You did awesome, Floofy.
Thanks, Floofy.
Floofy?
Oh, yeah, that's our nickname for each other. Isn't it so cute?
I don't know. Why don't you ask the real Floofy?
Is that the elf's name, or is that just a slur for him specifically? I think something must have been cut around here, because before the scene ends, you can hear music that sounds like the beginning of a montage, and then it just cuts to Gabriel Iglesias and Magnus. Why did I even dust off the montage counter? I guess now is as good a time as any to properly introduce what should act as our primary antagonist for this season. But the thing is, Magnus, by the way, played by another big sitcom white guy, the one from Modern Family. He doesn't even seem that bad, and inversely, Iglesias doesn't seem that taken aback by his ancient nature, and also the fact that Santa exists. He just immediately started rolling with it and then left to go run errands in his best Mario costume. But Magnus uses gnomes instead of elves, and the last surviving gnome, probably, Olga, seems to be the one pulling the strings. She's a bad influence, like he kind of seems like he doesn't want to do anything. Not once does he on his own consider getting revenge on the people who imprisoned him for millennia. Meanwhile, Sandra goes to talk to her mother, who simultaneously preaches girl power and individualism, but then calls the Christmas Witch one of the good ones. Ugh. Also, for a woman who talks such a big talk about paving your own path without a man holding you down, you must fucking hate your life and husband. don't forget the kids. This does not dissuade Sandra from her fears, so she goes back to the witch to train in secret. Speaking of secrets, Scott Santa finally puts his foot down and demands to learn more about this Magnus. By the way, they kind of drop the fact that there is a book of Santa lore that he could have read at any time and he is aware exists, but just didn't. Would have helped on your spirit journey. Magnus wasn't even present in his Santa mind palace for some reason.
Well, what we know as Santa all began with St. Nicholas, honoring the birth of Jesus.
Let's go! It took us 5 stories and 2 decades, but that is the first mention of Jesus Christ in this franchise.
Did somebody say?
Really thought it would have happened sooner. We get a lore dump and then also some flashbacks back to how the head elf and sidekick ended up together. And I simply do not care. Magnus made a utopia for all creatures to live in harmony together. But then something happened that the elves do not say, and they were all there. They do not age and we haven't seen them die yet. Well, we haven't seen them die permanently. So this dude was just off screen somewhere for the first 3 movies. Also, the way these elves talk about gnomes and also attempted to keep this information from, I think it was their racism that ruined everything. Like, all we've seen of Magnus so far, he seems like a decent guy. A little smelly, but what jolly fellow isn't from time to time?
Then I guess you don't want these figs and walnuts.
I want Roblox.
Who is this Roblox they keep speaking of? See another Santa? What did he invent? Certainly not good manners.
See? The joke would be a lot funnier if Iglesias didn't attempt to explain what Roblox is the very next line. Pretty poorly, I might add. I'm not even mad they got it wrong. I'm mad that they tried. And all before Magnus can declare his mission to take back the North Pole because kids today don't act right. I feel like every generation there's at least like 5 new Christmas properties that all say the same thing, where it's like, oh, kids today are so awful. They don't have the Christmas spirit anymore. It's because they be on that damn phone. It's been happening for decades now. Like, I think people just hate change. Christmas is not worse off with Gen Alpha children and their modern new crop of parents. Trunk or treat, though, is psychotic. Like, I'm all for change in the modern era, but that's fucking ridiculous. Really, what these movies want to say is that nobody's Christian anymore and they're upset about it, but they can't say that unless they exclude most of the West. Completely unrelated to what I just said, daughter comes out as a witch to her normally conservative father, but he accepts her anyway. This is actually surprising from Scott, but then she refuses to tell her mother because she pulled the "one of the good ones" line earlier this episode. I'm way more interested into Sandra's training arc in becoming a witch and what even being a witch at the North Pole means. And I think that the show is also mostly focused on that and mostly excited about that, but I also don't know anything about Magnus and his little buddy, and also Cal is there, I guess. Episode 3 follows the narrative through line set up in the previous. The kids continue their training arcs and Magnus attempts to make concepts for a plan. Sandra puts on big earmuffs to try and keep the voices out, her words, not mine, and Cal whips the elves, I guess. And you could have easily just expected this to take place immediately after the last episode. I mean, not a whole lot changes, but then Magnus bemoans that his magic hadn't come back after 3 months of being free. 3 months? What have you been doing this whole time? Where's Iglesias? And their big plan that they finally think of now, 3 months in, is we need to get to the North Pole. It took you 3 months to think of that. That's the first place I would check. While Cal is screwing up his Santa duties, Sandra is growing closer with the Christmas witch. They're both witches, which is making the mother most upset and jealous.
Because a lot of fun is just like having a cool aunt. You ever had a cool aunt?
I had a cool Aunt Louise.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, she didn't like me.
Oh. Is that what we're calling it? Yeah, I got a cool aunt too, except when I was a kid, my parents told me that the woman she's been living with her entire life and her are just really good friends. Back at wherever this is, Olga, the Mad Santa's second in command, captures a holiday creature for intel. And it's not at all what the Easter Bunny looked like before in this franchise. I like to assume that for whatever reason, all the holiday creatures follow the same set of rules as the Santa Claus, and this dude who's currently the Easter Bunny just accidentally killed the last one. Like, that one was not a setup, he just actually killed him. But then 3 days later, the original Easter Bunny rises from the dead and comes out of his tomb, and now he's got holes in his hands. It's a whole thing. Eggs come in at some point. Also, where did you even find this guy? He's just hopping about? Where's the crowd that was mad about the Little Mermaid casting? Where's the outrage for the Easter Bunny?
It's just sly, like a bunny.
No, it's sly like a fox.
No, I'm pretty sure it's sly like a bunny.
No, it's fox.
No, it's sly like a bunny.
No, it's sly like a fox.
Oh. Maybe they worked on this show. Back at the North Pole, the siblings bond over their complicated feelings about the destinies pushed upon them. Cal doesn't really seem to want to be Santa, and Sandra uses his vulnerability against him. The witches will take over the North Pole and shall inherit this power in no time. I don't know, man. We cut back kind of quick. I wonder what's happening back at the...
Does your tummy hurt?
Can we skip this episode, actually? Where did this fucking guy come from? The Calvins have a family dinner. Everyone is present. The emotionally reserved conservative father, the jealous and manipulative mother, the son with too much expected of him, the sister going through a lot of scary changes, the gay aunt. Wow, it's just like, never mind. Man, she really is just becoming more and more wicked. She's got the Kubrick stare down and everything. The Christmas witch notices that Mrs. Claus is feeling down, so she invites her to sit in on a lesson, to which she responds by immediately saying something offensive about brooms. Okay, so I've been strategically leaving things out of my play-by-play. I mean, I'm trying to tell a more streamlined and funnier story, and I easily could have cut out the wasted time here, but I need you to see how this sequence went down. Cal is hanging in a mailroom we've never seen before until Santa finds him. Cal asks how the letters to Santa even get here, and then we get a special sequence to show in great detail how the letters arrive. And you think, okay, this is way too specific and in-depth. This will definitely come back later. And then it comes back immediately after as Scott gets a letter that's clearly from Magnus. Like, he doesn't know that, but the audience does. And then a very, very short, like 4-second montage song plays as it shows Magnus sending the letter in like, yeah, man, I know. Do we really need to see all this? Imagine meticulously and slowly setting up Chekhov's gun and then immediately picking it up and blowing your brains out. Scott takes his underage kid to the after-hours party and makes him drink root beer. If I reference the live-action Pinocchio remake, will anyone know what I mean? Only true ultras will get this one. Also, tale as old as time, your father tries to bond with you at a Christmas party by getting you to drink eggnog. We've all been there. Speaking of a rite of passage, the fuck-up's father says, "I love you," like any conservative dad would. Silently. I think it's sweet that he's making an effort. Do I have an emotional attachment to the Santa Claus? In the final act, the new Easter Bunny arrives to warn Santa, but unfortunately, he's gotten himself entangled in a fight between a placebo drunk and Professor Xmas. I know it's a stretch, but it was either that or the Harlot Witch, all right? This line went through a lot of different jokes. In a powerful burst of anger, she accidentally transforms the Easter Bunny into a real rabbit. Easter is canceled. She killed Jesus forever.
Did somebody say?
The Christmas Witch shows up to put this together with a look of abject horror on her face. She's never seen a power this horrifying. She's been a witch all her life, but never has there been such a wickedness. She refuses to train her any further. After that episode, like mental episode, not of the show, the siblings meet on the terrace and compare their failures of days. I don't want to get too personal here, especially when I look like this, but Christmas really does mean a lot to me. Like, back in October, I thought, you know what, I probably love Christmas and Halloween the exact same amount, and then as soon as the clock struck midnight, and I saw all the lights, and it got dark at 4 p.m., and it got cold, it's no contest. Christmas is not only a specific vibe and aesthetic that I really like as a night owl, but also a form of bitter nostalgia. Like, your memories are supposed to be perfect and pristine. That's where we get the term rose-tinted glasses and nostalgia goggles. They're actually the same brand of eyewear, but I have no reservations about the tougher parts of childhood. So seeing this scene where two siblings who don't really have that much in common, finding common ground in escaping their family and coping with each other, I don't know, man. It took me back. But in this hypothetical, I'm the witch. I love that the second she learned she was a witch, she immediately styled herself in all black and started wearing fingerless fishnets. I guess it has been 3 months. 3 months? The kids decide to go for a joyride, like hit 2023 film Joyride, and Cal goes to surprise his softball long-distance Pookie. I know it's been 3 months, but I didn't even notice she left. But she breaks up with him because he's always so busy and he forgot her birthday. I guess this show can only have so many gay characters. Must have been a rough 3 months. Cal protests and tantrums, throwing his magic Santa training coat in the back of the sleigh in anger. But because they're on Earth, it falls off and one Magnus Antis finds it, using its power to begin his revenge after 3 months of doing nothing. Wait, so he was also in Chicago? They introduced a rabbit guy in this episode to turn around and ostensibly kill him immediately. Like, in practice, she could have just turned one of the elves, maybe a higher up elf, into an animal, and it would have accomplished the same goal. Why did they invent this? It couldn't just be for the shit fart scene, right? Was it for the shitting egg scene? I like to believe I have hope and joy in this world, and that is not why. Sidekick is going to explode if he does not calm down. And this is incredibly literal. But I wouldn't be too worried since we've already seen elves get exploded and then unexploded last season. I never thought I'd be glad Iglesias is back. Okay, so apparently Magnus's new plan is to change Iglesias's park into a winter wonderland. So not going to the North Pole then. You didn't think of anything for 3 months and have changed your grand plan twice in 1 week? Then why even send the letter? Is this still the same show? Well, I mean, I guess it is now that the North Pole has to cover up the murder of the new Easter Bunny, making Scott the new Easter Bunny, I guess.
Exactly, and what do eggs have to do with Jesus?
How did Jesus like his eggs?
I don't know, guys. Why don't we ask him? I don't know. I never met the guy. I mean, if we really want to put Christ back in the holidays, maybe it's good that the bunny bit the dust. The kids are not okay. Both are very traumatized from their individual failures. The fact that this is the same Sandman from the original trilogy only makes it more clear that the last bunny man got axed. Was the one the kids killed and turned into a rabbit, was he the first human creature hybrid like Scott? Because he wasn't full bunny. The previous guy was a full rabbit. And now they gotta take this guy out. Semi-permanently. What is sleep if not a trial for death? Sandra's mom tries to comfort her by getting their anger out by destroying the Easter Bunny's room. You know, if you didn't want to implicate yourself, I hope I see this scene in those female rage compilations someday. And in 10 minutes flat, she's open to using magic again. I guess we needed more time on the shitting scene. Also, Magnus is doing acts that do not constitute as evil at all. Like, this is a net positive. Okay, and now there's an ancient amulet he needs to collect. What were you doing for 3 months? I hate to keep making Doctor Who references because some of you probably won't get what I mean, but now Santa has a watch that makes him a mere human again. I was wondering how long it would take for Tim Allen to come back. Like, when they were putting together the first season, I imagined the pitch was like, oh, the Santa Claus family goes to the real world, and then they didn't know they were gonna get a second season because why would they? And it's sort of like a quota or mandate, whether it's in his contract or a marketing dispute, that for at least half the runtime, he needs to become Tim Allen again. But hey, that's just human nature. So the father and son duo go off to deliver eggs. Is Easter today? Is that how the rabbit showed up at Magnus? But I thought Olga sought him out. I don't pretend to know what's happening over in America with the B team. Are we really supposed to dislike this guy? He gave all the kids presents when all they got last year was dumb snow globes.
Yeah? What? Wait, am I gonna look like you or Santa?
That's actually a pretty good question.
Well, I guess that depends on what form he was in when he— oh no, Santa's in danger! And after 4 episodes, we finally see Scott and Magnus stand off, and holy shit, it could shoot fireballs? What have you been doing for 3 months? And then he just lets him get away. I'm not saying we need to see this new antagonist kill Scott Calvin where he stands. I'm not saying that. But on the morality scale, all we've seen of this character is he is a slightly unpleasant, joyous fellow and gift giver who only wants revenge on the elves that trapped him in a wooden toy for hundreds of years. I'm not saying he should win, I'm just saying I understand why he's upset. Magnus Antis broadcast to the entire nation, on the news, on television, local television. Even if it was the national news, I can't imagine anyone under the age of 50 would have seen it. The watch is malfunctioned and now Scott Calvin can't turn back into Santa. What are the odds? I guess it's as good a time as any to give the head elf a name, considering it's the name of this episode. It's Betty. This entire episode is a lore dump from her, aside from Cal and Sandra looking for the vest that Magnus clearly has and is doing nothing with. Cal does go to the Americas to claim his vest back with Magnus and gets taped to a wall along with Iglesias. I suppose that's the crime of standing there. And now he's a toy. Someone needs to come save him. But first, Betty's story, if we are to believe her, goes as follows. Magnus Antis grew paranoid and began to only listen to and trust the gnomes, cutting the elves out. I hate to stop the lore train right at the station, but yeah, Of course. We've only seen him be a good guy other than axing Cal, which all of us would have done in the same shoes, let's be real. He didn't trust the elves for no reason. I think there's parts of your story you're purposefully leaving out. After partying with too much fermented eggnog, which is already alcoholic, I don't know why it needed to be fermented. Okay, so every video we make here at BH Ultra, occasionally, it happens every video, but there's a lot of information. You tend to get some things wrong. It happens to the best of us. It just so happens that every video's most popular comment is commenters believing nobody else has said this, and they're gonna be the first one to let me know of the information I got wrong. I appreciate what you're doing, but I assure you, you are not the first person to correct me. I know Anne Maria appears in the Redonkulous race. Anyway, the most popular comment on the grandma got run over by a reindeer video was people going, eggnog doesn't have to have alcohol in it. It's not alcoholic. So you're just drinking egg juice for fun? Back to the lore dump. Betty finds an image of Bernard shaking hands with Magnus like that image of Elon and Ghislaine. I think we should look at this photo for at least a little while longer, considering, you know, it's YouTube. I could show this image as much as I want. Apparently Bernard hid a warning about Magnus before he was sealed away. Not to be seen in this season. If we gotta keep Santa in the costume, we gotta cut budget somewhere. By the way, while all of this is unraveling, Scott is slowly turning back into Santa Claus while listening to this story.
Why Santa Magic's coming back?
I feel like you're about to sell me a timeshare.
No, he clearly looks as if Colonel Sanders and the Monopoly Man had a child.
The Mad Santa's ultimate plan is to get every naughty child on the list and punish them by turning them into nutcrackers. This is, and I don't say this lightly, the plot of Red 1. Oh, sorry, spoilers for all the Red 1 heads that couldn't see it in theaters. I want to put up the ableism shield for a second. If you cannot go to the movie theater due to circumstances beyond your control, this does not apply to you. More power to you. You are always welcome here. I love you. But to the people who are fully able to go to the movie theater, but choose not to and only watch movies on streaming, you are beneath me. Haktuo, get away from me. I spit on you. Anyway, Betty went to the magical figures for help, and they didn't do anything. You know what? I'm glad the rabbit got killed. But interestingly, we learned that the only mythical being that lent a hand was the Christmas witch. I guess she does know her. She brought a big sack of Fairly Odd Parents holiday objects and gifted them to the elves. Kind of feel like this show is about her. While the story is being told, Sandra goes to make amends with the Christmas witch, where she warns the child about the dangers of transformation spells. Oh, she's got the fear of transformation too? She did not fear her. She fears what she might become. And although she cares for the child, she had a momentary lapse in judgment that cost them everything. And if you think that plotline is cool and nuanced, well, guess what? I just explained the plot of The Last Jedi, but no! I can't get into this. I'm not gonna... Merry Christmas. Back in the past, the elves lure the gnomes out with drums and kazoos, preparing for war. After hours of bloodshed, the battle moves below ground, where Magnus attempts to escape with his most trusted advisor. But in a twist, it was actually Betty, the current head elf disguised as Olga, to lure Magnus into a trap for both of them. This was the witch's plan all along. On Disney Plus. Betty may have proven herself as the most trusted elf in all the North Pole, but Olga proves her worth by running to save Magnus. By running behind him, which is how they both got frozen. So Betty proved her worth as the interim head elf while Bernard was missing in action in like 1307. And because of this, she deservedly so got promoted to the head elf position in at the earliest 2006, because Bernard wasn't in the third movie. Why did that take so long? Bernard could not have been that good. Mr. and Mrs. Claus used the letter system set up meticulously in the previous episode. Remember? From before. And as a symbol of trust, put Sandra and the Christmas witch in charge of defending the North Pole while they go collect Cal's corpse. I think this show is gonna end with the witches taking over Christmas. And then they could cross over with the Wizards reboot they're making with Ronald Reagan. I'm sure Tim Allen would love that. But we also might be on the precipice of war, of turmoil. Wizard battle! It's time for the final episode of the Santa Clauses. So far. They're not making any more of this. And here it is, the grand finale. The elves are all in a panic about the oncoming arrival of Magnus Antis and his hand, Olga. The acting head elf, the sidekick I never bothered to learn the name of, says no more running, no more fear, no more anger. They're prepared for war, and he prepares for battle by telling all the elves to evacuate, leaving only him and the witches. Okay, so I was gonna go on a rant about how they just let their entire militia go, but let's be real, they wouldn't be nearly as helpful as the witches anyway, and honestly not nearly as powerful as just Sandra, like if we're power scaling. But while the elves go somewhere, it's unclear where they can even go, Betty takes her own path, her own journey. She recognizes that she's the one they want, and refuses to go down without a fight. Meanwhile, the Santa parents go to the human realm to collect the corpse of their sons so they can have a proper open casket. And Iglesias wakes to see Santa. Okay, so you do know what he looks like. You recognize him. Did you just assume there were two Santas? Did you not have any questions about the smelly guy who kept talking about an amulet? You lived with him for over 3 months. Surely you noticed something.
They've been plotting and doing all kinds of bad stuff.
What bad stuff?
Well, thank you for asking. For example, they've been ordering a lot of movies on demand, and I have all the streaming services. Can you get reimbursed for that?
Is this an ad? The clauses commandeer Iglesias' fake slave on the one condition that he comes with them. Is this guy, like, important to this season? Like, going into it not knowing the plot, but knowing he was in it, I assumed they were prepping him to be the next Santa. He's a jolly comedian, popular with kids and appropriate for Disney, but he spends 5 episodes before this not doing anything or even really having an arc. Oh, sorry, actually, you know what? I'm wrong. My mistake. 4 episodes. He's not even in all of them. Why does he even want to go with them? I know he likes Christmas, but what does he hope to gain on the front lines? A cool scar? I just know they're gonna show up there at the same time, even though Dark Team got a head start. Magnus gifts Olga an axe that I'm going to pretend has significant value. Let's say it's been passed down through gnome generations, and it used to belong to her father, who fought on the front lines alongside Magnus, but then died in his arms, and his one wish was to gift this axe to his daughter when she was ready. Does that work? Because I made that all up. I feel like it doesn't, because Magnus didn't really do anything bad. He wanted to, but ultimately it was really Olga's master plan. The entire season thus far has been telling us that Magnus is not that bad of a guy. He just listened to the gnomes too much. And then the final episode does everything in its power to make us believe the contrary. Something something amulet, who cares? The clauses arrive at the same time, go figure, and bring the Cal Nutcracker to the Christmas witches. Okay, so Iglesias knows her. He's a scholar of the holiday and is aware of obscure ancient deities, but not Magnus? Well, as it turns out, this ancient deity cannot pull off a reverse spell. She believes only Sandra is powerful enough, but the rest of the team requires convincing. Magnus arrives at the North Pole and splits up with Olga, which causes confusion. For me, not the characters in the show. Because after a millennia, all this time left festering on the revenge in that nutcracker, Olga, with her father's weapon in hand, finally has a chance to face down the head elf that trapped her there. On the other end, Betty sees her tumultuous past staring her right in the face, the culmination of every hard decision she's ever made. Will she reconcile with years and years of learning and changing, or will her defense slot her back into her old ways? I was gonna compare this fight set piece to like Obi-Wan or even The Force Awakens, but it's honestly more like the fight at the end of Revenge of the Sith that everyone says they like. But in actuality, they're watching the cut down version on YouTube that doesn't cut back and forth to another fight happening at the same time. And the thing is, I use that comparison because this episode does that too, but it cuts back and forth with hand-to-hand combat to the Santas talking about stuff. They're trying to out-annoy each other.
You want it? Take it! One day, I'll have something you want to play with, and I'm never gonna give it to you! Hey!
Remember when the series was about a single father trying to win the favor of his son? Maybe the reason Scott won't fight is because we learned here that Magnus is actually sapping the Santa power, which, like, I don't know. That seems fair. Like, I'm not saying he should turn every naughty kid into a wooden doll, but I'm saying I understand why he believes he's the one true Santa. He technically never passed on his lineage. They just started a new one. By generation. And as he looks at Scott, all he sees is a cheap, knockoff, a sorry display of human incompetence shoved inside the job of a god, and trying to make this finale seem way cooler than it is, because honestly, he lacks a lot of antagonistic momentum. We know that Olga has been pulling the strings, and Magnus only turned his back because he listened to the gnomes, but then he stopped by an army of gnomes led by the sidekick. He went underground to recruit them, and now hold on a minute. So the gnomes have just been living underneath the North Pole this entire time. They didn't go extinct like Olga and Magnus. They were just forced underground this whole time for years. They seem pretty cool and understanding here. I'm starting to think the story Betty told us is not accurate. I'm starting to think she is not the hero. Did Magnus even actually do anything? He just wants his magic amulet.
Is that mug your all-powerful doodad? I've been drinking out of that thing for years.
Brought you some cocoa.
Now wait a goddamn minute. You're telling me that there has been an ancient magical artifact right under our noses the entire franchise? Do you know what this means? Think of the implications, think of the lore, think of the... Oh shit, I guess he died. And nobody needed to shoot this time. Yeah, I don't trust anything this psycho says, because when we cut back to the fight scene, we see that Olga just wanted to make toys. And only now does Betty let her, because she spent the whole season seeing the world and she learned that racism is bad, actually. Why does she get the redemption arc when all Magnus is doing is calling out Scott for not knowing what his son wants, for forcing him into a role not built for him, but that doesn't line up with the kid dreams? He's the bad guy? Cal was never cut out to be Santa. We know this. He never wanted to, and he was never good at it. But the entire reason the Council of Previous Santas forced a human man to become Santa Claus is so they could sire children at the North Pole and they would be bestowed with epic power. So if the prophecy isn't Cal, then Sandra, the half-human, half-witch hybrid born of the North Pole, more powerful than any previous demigod, bestowed with the power of Christmas dark magic and Jesus, I guess.
What you may not know about humans, although we're not perfect, we do care about each other. And more than that, we love our neighbors.
Except if they're gnomes, am I right? The Christmas witch, the magical entity as old as time itself, was not powerful enough to return Cal to his previous form. But she was right about one thing. Sandra is. Cal leaps past Magnus after waking up, nabbing the amulet goblet of Christmas magic. And the day is saved! I think. Olga learns to make toys while Magnus gets to rot in a jail cell of his own creation. Also, Iglesias is there. They both agree to work together forever on his tacky theme park, which is arguably more torture than being trapped in a wooden doll for years and years. The ending is rapidly approaching, and Scott needs to complete his season arc. He allowed Cal to go free and be a normal human, even enrolling him in Earth College with no qualification whatsoever. He never passed the first grade, but sure. A lot can be done with a familial name and a lot of donations to a football field. Also, he throws him a North Pole prom and kidnaps Softball Riley, and she forgives him, I guess. Like, didn't they break up because he was so busy with his work and forgot her birthday, and then showed up at her house unannounced, and you thought the best way to win her back was to drag her here in a random day in April, presumably, and even worse, it worked? Oh good, another Kids Bop number. I won't be missing those. Cal gets to go off and live a normal life, but Sandra has to stay here. She is the heir to the North Pole throne, and soon enough she will be the most powerful being in this plane. Olga and Magnus break up. Sandra fixed the Easter Bunny. Again, incredibly powerful. As the party works to a close, Betty has to return to her recon mission.
We used to say that was the only thing separating us from the gnomes. But we're friends now, so it's the only thing separating us from the trolls.
Still racist, I see. We've heard all season that the head elf is only supposed to spend a year on Earth and then return, but Scott lets us know in one throwaway line that Bernard and Curtis, yeah, remember Curtis, the Cat in the Hat kid that was in most of the movies and is only now getting mentioned? They both went on this same mission, and they both decided to stay on Earth. Okay, so did they both fall in love with humans, or did Curtis fall in a storm drain and they just assumed assumed he quit. So Scott is about to lose his third head elf in the span of like 20 years. Considering Bernard was head elf for hundreds, that's a pretty rough track record. But then he incentivizes his sidekick to go with her because he hates him, I guess. Now that I understand. So Scott is leaving himself without any head elf, immediately following 2 Christmases in a row where the holiday was almost ruined and he was almost killed. I'm going to assume there were more shenanigans off screen that we never saw. And the series ends as we jump ahead to 7 months later, leaving us squarely at Christmas 2025, as they watch Magnus and Iglesias do a poor routine. Is it not Christmas? Don't you have a job to do? And the Santa Clauses, the family, the show comes to an end. Not with a bombastic finale or a final goodbye, but more of a see you later, leaving many, many more questions unanswered. Okay, so just for consistency, what? How are the elves able to give up their aging powers? Can they do the inverse? Why are the kids able to age? What happened to Curtis? What's gonna happen to Betty and co? How did that one guy lose his eye? Does Olga work at the North Pole now? Do the rest of the gnomes have to go back underground? What about the trolls? They name drop them and we never see them. What's gonna happen to the tech CEO and his daughter? Why was Iglesias even in this? Do you remember that orb from before? What was the deal with that? We know that Cal is going off to college with his gay girlfriend in a world he knows nothing about with a kindergarten reading level, but now it is that can get you a PhD. But the previous Santa we know set the entire Calvin family up to make a magical being. But now the hybrid exists and she's gonna continue training at the North Pole? She's already surpassed the Christmas witch. There's only so much more they can teach her. I mean, she has to become Santa, right? Sandra Claus? That's clearly where the show is heading. I have to see more of the show, please. I never thought I would want to see more of the Santa Claus, but they set up a system of magic and prophecy that seems so simultaneously horrifying and exciting. I sort of get the feeling that although they did set up Mad Santa in the first season in Shadows, they got a little bit too confident. Like, I believe they probably thought they were doing a one and done, and they're like, okay, we could wash our hands of this. This probably should have been a movie, but whatever. And then they got renewed for another season, and they thought, oh, dope, we could do this every year. I mean, every other major franchise they own is passing the torch to the next generation so they can continue making merchandise and films, and now we have a half-human, half-witch Christmas magic hybrid of moral ambiguity. But we currently stand in December, Christmas 2024, and no third season. Also, no more Acolyte, I guess. Yay. I gotta say, although I do stomp and shake and scream, it is kind of nice to be standing here talking about the Santa Claus again for the first time. Like, I don't know how to do this job. I didn't even think I could. That's not why I'm here. I came here out of circumstance and because I had to be. Then the previous guy got caught up in flights of fancy, and ultimately that's what got him axed. I'm here because of him. But if you look back at some of the oldest videos currently active on this channel, on the BH Ultra YouTube channel, it's either the first Natter Chamber video, the oldest one you can watch, is when the kid delved into the Santa Claus and left some pretty big shoes to fill. So consider this my initiation. Every Andrew unit needs to be cast into the fire of Tim Allen and be forged in that same fire. And I'm lucky I could follow in those footsteps, as I'm the second or third. Was it second or third? Actually, hold on. Well, hold on. That was the first one he made when he decided to come back. Had nothing to do with me. What came before? Listen, I see it now. I've been fighting it all year, but I see the light. I see why it took him so long to leave. This is actually legitimately fun. I could see myself doing this for years. But if I want to do this right, I need to follow in his footsteps. Ugh. Do you know what happened? Like in 2019, do you know what happened? Guess that's a story for another day. Another year and 100,000 freaks. 100,000? Are you serious? That's ridiculous. And to those hundreds of thousands of freaks that fall asleep listening to these for some reason, Merry Christmas, cherish your loved ones, because someday they might just go missing. Didn't he have a niece who had, like, Christmas powers?